Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's session, today's episode, which is a mashup. I have two guests here for you today, wonderful people from episode 61. Saka Hitman, who's the country manager, managing director of LHH New Zealand, and he shares his thoughts and so forth around the question, who's your favourite leader? Now, this could be alive or from history, and why? And my second guest is from episode 62, Stephanie Murphy. She's the lead for assessments and analytics at Dell Technology, and she shares some wonderful insights as well. Hey, listeners, if you haven't already checked out their episodes, episode 61 and 62, check them out because they're wonderful, and they share some wonderful insights, observations, and learnings for sure. All right, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group and the LinkedIn page, go ahead and check out those two platforms. We'd love to see you join. And the other thing, too, is please share this episode with 3 other people. Share them the podcast. We'd love to get more people, more listeners having a listen to this podcast indeed. All right, team, this is now time for you to sit back, take notes, relax, and enjoy the mashup. So tell me, I'm sure there may have been several people, but who's your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
Well, Dennis, for obvious reasons, you probably will be able to understand that I can't give you just one. I think I thought about this long and hard over the weekend when you asked me to come on this show. And I have to say that Ken Chenault, the CEO at American Express during the time that I was there, has been a great inspiration, a great leader. Also in this day and age of diversity and inclusion, it's great to have a man like that to look up to, and it was a real privilege. I had the opportunity to meet him 3 times. Now, these moments, as you will understand, are not very long, so I had probably on total maybe 10 minutes with him. But I think what struck me really, first of all, he's a really nice guy, very, very down to earth, very humble in a way as well. But I think what I learned from him is that it's really key to focus on the customer and to focus on building a brand. It's important to keep your eye on the ball with the customer. And he used the words that people like to connect emotionally and rationally to a service and a product. And particularly that emotional connection, I think, is really important and is something that I've carried with me in my career and definitely working for LHH here in New Zealand, where our brand is not as well known. I've always gone back to that. It's, do your best with your customers, keep your focus there. The other thing that he has done over the time that he's been there is constantly reinventing the company. I mean, American Express is about 160 plus years, and you need to reinvent yourself to stay current in the marketplace. And the other thing that I was really quite amazed by at the time when I just started working there is he said it's okay to make a mistake. Make a lot of mistakes, but not the same ones all the time, because from the mistakes you learn and you will progress. But he says whatever you do, never tarnish the brand. So those are sort of a few things that he brought along. And I just wanted to share with you, because I went back and watched an interview that he did in 2014, and he was reflecting on 9/11 and and obviously the awful loss of life on some of our colleagues. There were 17 of them who were lost in the Twin Towers there. But he said at the time also, the hard part of being a leader around layoffs is really difficult. And I thought that is really relevant in today's time with COVID and a lot of companies making those hard decisions. And he said the challenge of leadership during this time is being decisive and compassionate at the same time. And what struck me as well from that interview, he said that people need to both tell the truth and don't talk down on people. And you have to explain the reason why. And I thought that was quite poignant, particularly since we are seeing such a lot of change currently in the market, not just here, but over the world.
Yeah, let me ask a question around what you just shared before about what he said around keep reinventing yourself, meaning I think more the company is reinventing itself. But would that also be true for you as a leader, as an individual, having to reinvent yourself on a regular basis?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in any role and in any new responsibility, you learn new things. And I mean, I don't know quite how I would say that. But you meet yourself when you grow, when you go through that as a leader, you come across situations that you might not have dealt with before. And when I came to New Zealand with American Express, which was fantastic, they family, cats, and all were taken back to New Zealand. A couple of years later, unfortunately, I was hit by a restructure myself, and my role was moved to Singapore, and we'd chosen as a family not to want to move. And I had to reinvent myself. I came from, as I said at the beginning, hospitality, tourism. In the advisory services side, it was all around procurement and that side of things. And I didn't really have a finance background. I just dabbled in it for a little bit with a local company in New Zealand. But in the end, I ended up with a recruitment company with Randstad initially, and now LHH is part of the wider Adecco group. So, yeah, you do need to adapt to the situation and reinvent yourself.
Yeah, and I think what you talked about before is that you probably develop yourself, you go out and do things that you may not have done past, but you also will meet yourself, as you said. Probably you become that person, that leader, and also it's a maturity thing too, which is interesting to see. Here's an interesting question for you. You may have several, but I'm going to ask you to choose one. And so who's your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or it could be from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
That is a very difficult question. There are so many good leaders out there. Yeah. And this probably fits your previous question. I'm going to have to go with Michelle Obama being my favorite leader. But I think, for obvious reasons, because she is one of the few Black female leaders that we were able to see in my lifetime in America that was just very visible. But the main thing is what we talked about before in terms of influence. She had several initiatives about, eating healthy and getting kids to move. And she used tools like dancing or the latest dance moves that kids were doing. And she used social media. And I found that she wasn't afraid to be transparent. And she wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, even if she couldn't do this dance moves or she wasn't doing them correctly. And she wasn't afraid to be, vulnerable in that state. And she wasn't afraid to be on someone's level, to understand where they're coming from and relate to them in order to get kids and other leaders and across the world, right, to kind of align with where she was headed and to be a part and really buy into her initiatives. And I find that leaders need to do more of that. That transparency and vulnerability is key to building trust. And when you trust someone, you'll follow them.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the thing that you've just said there, which is being on someone's level and not being afraid to do that, is key. I don't care who you are, what leader you are, it is really important, because I think at the end of the day, that's what people want. They're not stupid. They can see through you. If they know if you're not authentic. And so, as you said, the keys to building trust is being able to be on someone else's level and not being afraid to do that, being vulnerable and transparent, which is wonderful. I think that's the best thing. I think it's key. I think that's the end of the episode, really. I mean, it's so good because I think that's how strong those points you've just made are. I think they hit the nail on the head. It's just really, really, really strong. And I think listeners, I think that's a wonderful thing that Stephanie's just shared with us. The fact that if you can be transparent, vulnerable, but be on someone else's level, I think that's being the relatable side of things, right? So it's being relevant for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's the humility piece of it, right? It's like, you're going to have a diverse group of team members, especially as the workforce is changing and as Gen Zs enter the workforce and you're getting more and more diverse. There's going to have to be an element of, one, I'm not the smartest person in the room. A lot of people will be coming with fresh out of grad school with degrees that are fresh with the book knowledge, and so recognizing they might know new ways of doing things and better way of doing things. So recognizing you're not the smartest in the room, and then recognizing that you're going to have to learn where they're coming from, and that's that humility piece we were just discussing.
Wonderful. Hey, listeners, there you go. Two wonderful guests that I've had on my actual podcast, the show Leadership is Changing in the Past. Of course, from episode 61, Saka Hitman, and from episode 62, Stephanie Murphy. If you haven't already checked them out, please go ahead and check out those episodes. They are really wonderful to listen to. Hey, the other thing too, just a reminder, Facebook and LinkedIn. We have a group on Facebook and a page on LinkedIn. If you haven't already joined those platforms, we would love to see you join those communities, and we would welcome you along to them. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends, your family, your network. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show or about the show, or if there's any feedback you'd like to give me or give any questions you want me to ask my guests as I interview them, or a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode that happens once a week, feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey team, please share this episode with 3 other people. Love to see them join and get some great value from these different episodes as we're sharing on the show, Leadership is Changing. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.